Hello and welcome to the Uncultured Nerd Show. My name is Maeve and I am an uncultured nerd who loves to obsess over a few favorite TV shows. I have a few movies and TV shows I have selected to be the ones I rewatch constantly. I go through phases of which one receives the honor of being rewatched every month or so, and since I've been seeing family a lot over this month, I turn to a show whose whole thing is family, but just more interesting than mine.
Life is like a hurricane here in Duckburg.
Yes, I frickin' love DuckTales. The reboot, not the original. Not that I don't like the original, I just haven't seen it. I have seen the movie based on the show, but that's about it. I checked the show out because the first episode premiered for free on YouTube, and I was hooked from the beginning. It came out at the perfect time since I had just finished binging Gravity Falls, and this seemed to have a very similar style and energy. And boy, was it awesome! Even though I think the overarching mystery was better in Gravity Falls, the individual adventures of DuckTales I find much more entertaining with a higher rewatch value. So in this video, I'm counting down my top 10 favorite, not best, favorite episodes of the DuckTales reboot. Definitely high on my rewatch list, and a girls-only episode. Similar to The Phantom and the Sorceress, it's so amazing that these episodes don't feel like special girl episodes, they just feel like regular episodes. And this is the introduction of one of my favorite original characters, Violet Saberwing. It's pretty incredible how seamlessly Violet fits into this universe without feeling like they were trying to force in more girls to appeal to a wider audience. She is the perfect mix of deadpan and super nerdy, a sort of mix between Lena and Webby, adding the perfect third member to the group. Speaking of Lena, she has returned from her last appearance at the end of season 1 to once again prove how great a friend she is, but also how much she still needs to learn about being good. While it was suspicious at first that Violet had the amulet, Lena did let her obsession get the best of her and had to literally fight her demons to save Webby. Nice metaphor there. I also really liked that the solution was not Violet and Lena become friends to save Webby. They still don't know or really like each other by the climax and have to find a shared reason to unite against the greater enemy. True, them becoming friends in the very next scene is a little quick, but still quite adorable. Definitely check this one out to learn the true meaning of friendship. This episode is in this spot for one reason, and that is the creativity of the Impossibin. I have no idea if these are original designs for the traps or based on something from the comics, but oh my goodness, they are cool. Definitely the favorite would be Quackfaster's library with the changing gravity. As a kid, whenever I was asked what superpower I wanted, I would say the ability to change my gravitational pull direction, so this is seeing my wish fulfilled on screen. The final room, of course, is an incredible fight with a great villain and well thought out animation. And of course, the classic double climax with the reveal of Bradford on the robot, and round 2 with the mega robot. The way they beat it as well is just so good. It feels like they're basically winning on a technicality because it's literally a glitch that allows them to beat the robot. But that is so in line with how Louis operates that it wouldn't make any sense if he did it any other way. The B-plot is less out there in the creativity department, but does have a whole lot of subtext after finishing the series. During my first watch through, I was a little confused at Mrs. Beakley's actions and thought this was slightly out of character for her to push Webby and the boys this hard. But after learning exactly how her and Webby's relationship started, now it makes a whole lot more sense. And of course, that ending hinting at what's to come is so perfect and leaves us wanting so much more. I think, like every other DuckTales fan, I wanted this to become a spin-off show. The whole episode feels like a test pilot, and a really good one. Why on earth did it not go anywhere? With all the Disney Plus shows coming out, you'd think they'd be open to bringing back the Disney Afternoon, but I guess not. Regardless, we've got one great Darkwing episode here, so let's talk about it. I'm so glad they did a two-parter because this story really needed the time to fully develop. There's a bunch of moving parts which almost stuff the episode a little too full, but stop right before the edge and end up just right. Of course, this is a Darkwing story, but the real stars I see are Gosling and Bulba. Bulba is quite the villain, and I think if you took his character and backstory, it'd actually be a perfect fit for a traditional Batman villain. A scientist who gets too deep in and is blinded by his own ambition and eventually killed by it. I mean, it's a classic Frankenstein story. But seriously, make him not a bull and he'd fit right into a Batman animated series episode. Gosling is also a delight and has a heartbreaking backstory. She basically is forced to pull the plug on her grandpa to save the world from collapsing. An actual child was forced to make that decision. That is dark. That is very dark, and wow, the animation really sells that struggle. Of course, her recovery after the incident is quite quick, but hey, there's only so much drama they can fit into a mostly for kids show. As for Darkwing, I do like him a lot. He's got some really good lines. The catchphrasing is great as always. Most of his growth just happened in his first appearance, so there's not much to dive into here. We do get a great scene where Goslin realizes just how much he cares about her. And wow, did that scene make me love him even more. Aside from the main story, Scrooge and his boys didn't have much to do, but Bradford does get some revealing character moments. His speech to Bulba is pretty much the first time we get any hint into what he actually wants, and it's a great precursor to the first adventure where the pieces all come together. This is an absolute must-watch. Even if we didn't get the series it clearly wanted to be. I mean, what can I say? This is one of the most perfect pilots I've ever seen. It's just so good. Right off the bat, everything is perfectly set up. It's fully recognizable through design and atmosphere as the original show, but also sets itself completely in the modern world with faster humor and more adult storylines. I will say there are a few moments of inconsistency with the characters. I always thought this Huey moment was very out of character.
Where's Dewey?
Sleeping? Who's Dewey?
It feels like Louie and Huey should have switched lines there. But those are minor issues, which are normal in a pilot. I could talk for hours about every single minute of this episode, but for the sake of time, I'll just mention a few of my favorite moments. I love Webby's introduction. I don't think I'm in the minority when I say I don't like the original Webby. I was a pretty stereotypical tomboy growing up, and even though I only watched the movie, I still felt like she was given a bad name to girls because of how useless she was. This is a complete 180, which could be argued is extremely similar to another Disney XD protagonist, but hey, she was fun, and to me at least, she doesn't feel like a ripoff. The adventure is a perfect two-parter escalation which establishes every character's ability with the dragon, then tests those abilities in Atlantis. When Atlantis permits it, of course. I really love this joke.
Stupid upside-down temple. Nothing cool about walking under buzzsaws.
It's also a pilot that just gets better on rewatch when we discover the answers to the questions we were asking for the rest of the season were just said right out.
I was not responsible for the speed of Celine.
Right there, they just came out and said it. Also, from the first encounter between Donald and Scrooge, tension is immediately clear and not just normal not liking each other. Why did these two, who used to adventure together all the time, completely cut ties to the extent that the triplets didn't even know they were related to Scrooge? By the way, the reason Donald is forced to reconnect with Scrooge is such a beautiful way to show how much of an amazing uncle he is. On rewatch, I'm just in awe of how perfectly everything with Della was handled right from the beginning. It's an amazing start to an amazing show. One of the highest on my rewatch list and is one of the most creative in the entire show. I love the concept of entering dreams. Inception all day! And this episode takes full advantage of the setting. Each kid gets their own time to shine in their personal dream, and each makes sense to the character. I will say Violet is maybe glossed over a touch, but her dream being understated makes sense to her. My favorite has got to be Dewey, which is hardly surprising. The entire sequence is one big friendly jab at High School Musical with the Dewey flair, and I would totally watch a whole trilogy set in this dream. And of course, that montage is just perfection. It was very clever for them to use a snippet of it for the trailer because it confused me so much and made me need to watch every episode as it aired to figure out how the heck Launchpad became a whale. And it's a much simpler explanation than I thought it would be. But of course, the star of the episode is Lena. In a way, she is a shining example of just how good this series is because she is a completely original character who elevates the material and doesn't feel out of place. I really didn't think after her first kind of lackluster episode that she would go from an emo stereotype to one of the most complex characters on the show. This wasn't quite the end of her arc, but in my opinion, it was the best chapter. Della's first big episode, and what a perfect way to introduce her. I'm so glad the entire runtime was dedicated solely to her story with no secondary plot to cut away to. Okay, let's start first with character building. This episode should be studied. Della is one of the most well-developed, perfectly flawed sitcom moms out there. She's clearly very smart, but overly confident in her abilities, which leads her into very sticky situations. Hence, getting stuck on the moon in the first place. And once she gets there, her escape montage is very very revealing about her extremely ADHD methods. I mean, one of her first ideas is to just jump. She chooses quick and non-complicated over the tedious method of learning rocket science, but does eventually come to terms with the hard truth of doing things the right way slowly. But even then, she still becomes the reason she doesn't make it back sooner. She's the one that escalated that fight with the moon bug. If she had just kept her temper in check, she wouldn't have kicked up all the dust clouds, and she would probably have made it back years earlier. But even though she faces all these setbacks through over a decade, her drive to get home is never lost, until she is faced with definite proof that all hope to return is gone, and her breakdown, while a little funny, is devastating. I mean, it's pretty much the classic Donald Duck freakout, but with crushing reason behind it. But then, after all that anger and devastation, the writers were like, let's break their hearts even more! And my goodness, you are lying if you tell me you didn't cry during this song. Of course, the episode does end on an uplifting note, and we see there's still hope for Della to make it home, but my goodness, is this one just an emotional roller coaster? Funny, uplifting, soul-crushing, and just a stunning example of how to set up an incredible character. This is a top tier for the series. The first season finale for the show, and what a way to end a season. Of course, Magica has been built up the whole season as the big bad, and in the previous few episodes, her threat has grown with the nearing of the full moon. So what better way to show her power than bringing all the shadows in the city to her command and kicking Major Ducktail? Just to start off, Magica is such an incredible mix of funny and dangerous, and these shadows are the perfect representation of that mix. Yes, they are frightening, but there's also a lot of comedy to be had with their bizarre, gooey makeup and interactions with themselves. Gladstone in particular is just gold. I'm not going to talk in detail about the lead-in episode, we'll get to that soon enough, but the way this episode starts out with everyone separated and in the dumps is perfect. As we saw throughout the rest of the season, what kept Lena and Magica from getting the dime from Scrooge was his connection with his family, and after they're gone, his defenses are lowered to almost zero. Starting off everyone at their lowest, I think, was a great plan because it shows how each individual character deals with the doldrums, but also how resilient every character is when faced with those challenges. This battle would have been hard if every character was at the top of their game, but they are basically torn apart and have to bring themselves back together and fight for survival at the same time. I really appreciate how the fight was not super rushed out. It was really important that the episode took up 2 time slots so that time could be taken for the characters to confront their feelings, come to terms with them, and then go into the final battle. Instead of the first 2 steps happening in 5 minutes, they get the proper amount of time to occur organically. And both storylines get their time to shine and contrast well with each other, with one more dramatic with the boys and one more comedic with Scrooge. I know that might sound a little weird, but Magica trying over and over again to deal with Scrooge is very funny, while also being quite tense at the same time. Her coming to terms with Scrooge's downfall and being disappointed that this is who she has to fight, I think is hilarious. It's not just that she wants her body back, but also she wants the glory of defeating Scrooge, and he needs to be in his peak form for it to be worth it. Of course, once she does get her power back, the episode gets even better, with part 2 being one long epic climax, with one of the best ideas in the entire show. 1, great reference to Carl Barks. 2, why Don Cheadle? I don't know, it's just perfect. And 3, how funny is it that Donald has been saying all these badass lines the whole time, but we just never understood them? Effing hilarious. Everyone gets their own side adventure to shine, eventually converging into the big final fight. And even though this was clearly Dewey's season, this was Webby's fight. Magica had done her the most immediate damage, and her fight was fueled by that anger and pain. And then when the bracelet starts to glow, fan scream moment! I do always forget that Lena wasn't the one who ultimately defeated Magica, but she might as well have, since she saved the kids and gave them the time to get the dime and get Scrooge out. Once Scrooge is out, the fight is pretty much a cakewalk, but still fun. And after all that reuniting and forgiveness, of course, they had to give us one last emotional gut punch. The second series finale, which ups the ante from the first one in ways I did not know I needed. The first season finale focused just on the main family, and now we've got everyone else to join in. And I think an indicator for a great character is that I get excited to see them interact off each other. I was giggling like an idiot when I finally got to see Darkwing and Gizmo Duck have their brief exchange. Lena and Duckworth, also perfect. I would watch a whole episode just of this group around a conference table trying to come up with a plan. But to the main plot, I love that this is not just a retread but bigger monsters of of the first season climax. The battle is completely different. The motives of the characters going in are completely different, and the stakes are a lot higher. Remember when I said for the season 1 finale, it would have been hard if everyone was at the top of their game, but it was extra hard because everyone was in the dumps? Well, here, everyone is at their peak game, and they still lose. Magica may have been plotting for years, but her plan wasn't the most intricate or thought out. Lunaris' plan has so many moving parts, and he is always thinking 12 steps ahead, to the point that all efforts our heroes make are futile. It's like the season 1 finale, but instead of starting at their lowest and working their way back up throughout the fight, they start at their highest, get knocked down even lower than before, and have to climb their way back up while every obstacle tries to push them back down. And in actuality, they do lose. Scrooge would not have been able to win this on his own, or even with his family's help, because Lunaris knew him so well. Oh, hello, Flintheart. This solution was brilliant. Lunaris expects the smartest plan possible, so let's just give him the dumbest, absolute perfection. And speaking of perfection, Della and Donald's reunion. Of course they would immediately get mad at each other. They're siblings, all we do is fight. And then when they do hug, yes, I was crying, so what? This island setting also becomes the place for Louie's big season arc wrap-up. Well, technically the previous episode did a lot of that, but this was his big wrap-up on his issues with Della. It was clear that Louie had found it the hardest adapting to having a mother back in his life. And this is probably the most tender moment they have shared alone together. Why does this episode love making me cry? And then that final reveal. We finally got the big bad setup for the next season in the previous finale, and oh my goodness, would it pay off. And we'll get to that soon. The penultimate episode of season 1, and holy crap. Like I said in the Shadow War entry, that episode started off with everyone at their lowest, and this is the episode which got them there. The whole setup on a teetering cliff on the edge of an uncertain fate is an obvious but beautifully fitting setting for this emotional roller coaster. We've spent the entire season following Dewey on his journey for answers, and at each step, his determination to find the truth has gotten stronger. It was tested in the Gods episode, his motives were questioned in the Castle episode, which ultimately led to the support he needed to get closer than ever. I bring this up because it's clear throughout the episode that while all the kids want the answer, this is Dewey's journey. He was the one willing to risk everything and get the last piece of the puzzle. Even Webby, who has been on this journey longer than he has, won't risk what he will for the answer. Along with Dewey's obsessive chase, Scrooge also needs to grapple with his own shortcomings in the face of immediate death. His big thing all the time is that he keeps his family safe no matter what, which, after the reveal, we really get why that is. And poetically, the only way he can keep Dewey safe this time is to admit to the one time he failed. After the truth is revealed, the audience obviously wants everyone to forgive each other and grow closer, but this truth tears the family apart. Even though we as the audience don't want them to break up, both sides' reactions are very understandable. Of course the kids would blame Scrooge. Yes, Della was the one who made the ultimate choice to go, but he was the one who gave her the tool which left them motherless their whole lives. And their children. They're not going to think through all the logic and complexities behind what happened. All they understand is that Scrooge is the reason their mother is gone. And if those emotions weren't devastating enough, now we come to the main reason. This one holds the number 2 spot, the final scene. Others have talked about its perfection, and everything they've said is correct. Scrooge's side of the story, told just through storyboards, is the emotional gut punch landing us fully in the darkest moment before the dawn. Can you imagine if the series just ended there? I think there would be riots. Anyway, let's get to number 1. But by now I'm pretty sure it's obvious which one it is. Of course this had to be number 1. It does everything a finale should and more. I could do an hour on every side adventure, character moment, and reveal that happens in this 3-parter, but for this list, let's keep it short and sweet. So far, each season has had one kid as the main focus. Dewey had season 1, Louie season 2, and Huey season 3. And along with that, Webby has had her own long arc alongside. Webby's character has gone through a lot to get her here, and her driving conflict through most of her story has been her desire to find the family she never had. Now, all of a sudden, 2 blood relations are dropped into her lap and makes her question the family she found along the way. It's an understandable struggle, and I'm right there along with her the whole time in her quest for answers about, first, why she has clones, and second, why she was created. Which, let's get into all of that. It's amazing how each season finale ups the ante even further, but in completely different ways, largely because of the different nature of each villain. In this this case, Bradford's refusal to even classify himself as a villain makes him stand out because, yeah, you can kind of see where he's coming from. The Duck family does cause a lot of collateral damage. We've seen it throughout the series, and Bradford probably, as head of Scrooge's board, was the one to clean up all those messes through mountains of paperwork. Something he was also presumably doing at Shush when he came up with this plan. It makes sense that all he sees to adventuring and mystery solving is chaos and nonsense which needs to be reined in. Probably because he was not very good at it.
Bradford wasn't just the first woodchuck, he was the worst woodchuck.
He can't see past the danger in mystery and adventure and can't understand how anyone else could either. So his villainy is one of the most interesting kinds. The villain who thinks they're helping everyone, but in reality they just want to control everything, and if a few people need to get erased along the way, well, that's just for the greater good. The greater good. And to achieve this greater good, Bradford has the most brilliant, while definitely overcomplicated plan. Okay, so this plan did make me go, huh, a couple times after I stopped to think about a few things, but on this rewatch, some of those huhs did kind of make a little bit more sense. After the first watch through, I was left wondering why Bradford didn't just kidnap Webby or the boys way earlier than this and make them get the parchment instead of spending years and years making clones. But I do realize now that he needed all the missing mysteries, especially the sword and the ramrod key, to force Scrooge to sign the parchment and erase any chance of another adventurer taking over. And also, it does seem like the clones were the easiest way to break into the mansion and steal the missing mysteries, kind of like double agents who double-cross almost immediately. He also is pretty much this world's version of a bureaucrat, and who else would have an overly complicated plan but a bureaucrat? A plan which has the dumbest loophole ever, and they do say it's the dumbest loophole ever, so I don't mind. Also, the parchment is known to exploit every loophole possible to screw over whoever writes on it, so despite this being unbelievably cheesy,
According to this, Scrooge can be with his family as long as he does an adventure. But family is the greatest adventure of all!
it's also, I think, the most DuckTales way to defeat an evil plan. Family has always been how our heroes keep on surviving, and this final adventure is no different. Even though this is definitely not the final adventure for these guys. Yes, the series has ended, but it's one of those endings which makes it clear that these characters aren't stopping what they're doing. They're going to keep on having adventures forever. We may not see them, but you don't have to think it's over. I'm not sure if that made any sense. Let me rephrase. Basically, this is the last adventure I get to be on with them, so it's sad, but not as sad as it would be if it was the last adventure ever. So I'm sad I can't be with them anymore, but not as sad as I would be if I thought they weren't able to go on adventures again. Does that make sense, or am I thinking about these fictional characters as too real? Probably that one, because I have no friends, which forces me to immerse myself deeply into fantasy worlds and make the characters my friends. On an unrelated note, the character I relate most to in all of TV history is Abed. 6 seasons and an upcoming movie! What were we talking about? Oh right, DuckTales! This was the perfect series finale. I laughed, I cried, I fan-screamed, and I loved every second of it. And that was my top 10 favorite DuckTales episodes. Remember, top 10 favorites, not top 10 best. I loved making this mostly because I got to rewatch the whole series to come up with a list, and actually, I ranked all the other episodes along the way, so let me know if someday you want to see a full hour on that. Thank you so much to all my fellow freaks for watching, and I'll see you next time with something else. See y'all later.